Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Paula Taylor, and I am the Marketing Manager with Adequest. Welcome, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this webinar and you provide us with feedback. Please feel free to ask questions during the webinar, as well as at the end of the webinar. I will try to address them. You also will be receiving a survey, and it's really easy to fill out, so please don't be shy. We love to get your feedback. I'd like to kick off today's presentation simply by saying that Adequest project management mantra is self-reliance and efficiency. We take pride in making sure we apply that mantra to everything we do. Our speaker today is David Ducolon, who will be addressing the webinar from 2 points of view. 1, a client story, and 2, best tips and practices. He'll then move on to talk about the Project Butler, a tool he built which allows organizations to reuse their data, maintain established processes, and build detailed project plans easily. As you can see, David Ducolon has a very thorough background in project management, holds 5 international patents, and has engineered aspects of Project Server 2003, 7, and 10. So without further ado, David?
Well, thank you, Paula. Yes, my name is Dave Ducolon. I am the Business Unit Director here at Adequest for Project Management and Information Systems. And today we're going to be talking about how to reuse information and more easily and more reliably build project schedules. But before we do that, let's start off with a little trick here. I want to show you something that came out from Microsoft in SharePoint 2010. It's a very under-advertised feature, and I find it personally very helpful in managing project schedules. So let me show it to you. First thing, it's the task list, the SharePoint task list that you see a screen clip on the presentation here. And in the upper right-hand corner, you see Open Schedule in Microsoft Project. That is new to 2010. And it's a very functional but hidden feature. Let's go ahead and take a little demo of this. So give me a second here. Okay, and let's go to a task list. Here we go. We have a task list, just a simple list of tasks in SharePoint. So we click on it, make sure we're on the List tab, and then the P, Open Project Schedule. We click that, and boom, project asks us a security question because we're opening at internet content. We say, yeah, we want to proceed, and then it goes ahead and synchronizes your schedule with that task list. So now I can work on that task list in Project and add things like durations and starts and other things that are project-oriented. And then all I have to do is go ahead and then synchronize it back with SharePoint through the backstage here in Microsoft Project. Okay, so that's just a little tip. It helps me build project schedules. So let's go ahead and get back to the demonstration. I will close this out first. And now we are, there we go. There, sorry. Back to the presentation. PowerPoint, love it. Okay, next slide. So, how did this need ever come about? Why are we doing this? Why did we come up with this? Well, we have a customer who is a large enterprise customer that a large portion of their business is heavily regulated, requiring them to get their products certified by standards bodies around the globe. Their products are made up of multiple components, and each component requires certification. So this customer needed a way to create a project plan that would address all of the certifications in every product they did for every component within the product. So they had already discovered something on them by themselves, and they built a Visual Basic macro to help them with this. And that was that the certification processes were not unique. Now, the configuration of all of them into a product was unique. So they tried to take a full project template, the conventional wisdom, and then pull out those things that they weren't going to use. That gave them many challenges, least of which was several corruptions in their project plans when they ran the macro. So they brought us on board, and together we came up with a different solution. I'm going to take you through that story here. But before we go ahead and further dive into the story, let's go ahead and just make sure that everybody here is here for the right purposes. Okay? Now, this probably doesn't apply to you if everything you do in your job is the exact same every single day. Now, that's not like most of us. Myself, I've never had a job like that. I'm not sure I could do it for too many days. Okay, but if you have loads of data to search through before you can put together a project plan, you have to do lots and lots of research and bring in experts and get all of the associated information, well, then this is for you. Maybe you're in one of those organizations. I've previously worked in organizations where they're heavily reliant on project templates. The issue here is that every project being unique is the best example of doing that work. And so then you end up having to sort through hundreds of project templates to try to find the right one for your next project. Well, if that's you, then again, you're in the right place. Or maybe my personal favorite, because yes, I do this a lot, is just copy my last project to start my next project. Yes, I'm guilty of that, and if you, like me, are guilty of that, then you'll want to hear this presentation. It gives a lot of suggestions on ways to improve that, even if you choose not to follow the exact solution that we have. Okay, so there's a little tip that's we're coming up with already. We've talked about or talked around the issue of projects and a project template not being the best way to reuse information because every project is unique. But as our client had figured out, the sets of tasks, and for them it was certifications, that was not unique. If you're certifying a battery in a remote control car versus a remote control TV device, it's still a battery certification. So with that in mind, think of your projects and try to find those things that are not unique. Store those and use those to build your projects. Okay? So what if you could reduce information overload? Our client had 1,700 tasks when they had their do everything project that they took things away from based upon questions of, are we going to sell it in country A or country B? That really required a lot of diligence to go in and manage 1,700 tasks. So let's take a look and see what that would actually look like. I don't have a 1,700 task, but instead I have a task list that we can look at here. And this task list, this project here has hundreds of tasks. So scrolling down, you know, there's 400 tasks here. Nowhere near 1,700, but 400. Do you want to search through this to try to find that one piece of information that you are responsible for maintaining? No. It's pretty hard to do that. So, using smaller sets of tasks, they're going to maintain the best practices, reduce the information overload. Okay? What if you could build a project totally from reused information? Now, if you're storing smaller pieces, you can put them together, and as they come together like building blocks, now you have something unique from something that wasn't unique. You know, let's just make a sideways comparison here. In the 90s, late 80s and early 90s, computers tried to do software reuse. And everyone was reusing programs. Well, every program was unique. It wasn't until later in the 90s when we started using object-oriented processes and pulling out the functions that were not unique and storing those in class libraries that software really started to be able to reuse components, and that has enabled all of the technology that we're using today on the internet. Okay, so why don't we do that in project management? Good question. What if there was a systematic way to capture your company's strategic process information? Our customer had a way to get certifications done more quickly than the competition, but the competition will also be able to do it more quickly than them eventually. So they have to be able to further improve. But the key thing for them was that you cannot miss one step. You miss one step and you cannot release that product. So whether it's 400 tasks, 1,000 tasks, or even 20 tasks, missing a step was not an option for them. So we'll be talking about how to make all of these reality for you. So, why do you care? Why do I care? For our customer, it was a more efficient system. The ability to add a new country to their list. They decided that they were now going to start selling in Saudi Arabia. That would require a programming effort to change the Visual Basic macro. Well, that's not very efficient for them because they want to grow their business, they want to do business in new countries, and they want to be able to maintain that. Also, they needed to stay consistent. I mentioned previously about the criticality of certifications. Well, our client needing to sell these products around the world cannot afford to miss a step. So we're proposing a way that you will improve the consistency on your within your projects. And furthermore, you could reduce redundancy. So our customer, they had found that the best practices were not in using large project templates, but smaller work packages. And this way, they also didn't repeat those work packages in the project 2 and 3 times. They would do it once. Okay? So why should you care? I hope some of these reasons are appropriate for your organization. So let me give you another tip here. Now, we've talked around about it, and let's make it more formal. Let's say exactly what it is. The tip here is to take those pieces of your project plan, which are highly repeatable, non-unique, and make those what we call work packages, staying in line with PMI terminology here. These are the smallest repeatable, estimatable, and tracking capable sets of tasks. Put those into a task library, kind of like a class library in programming. And then pull all of those together to build your next project, rather than finding a project and trying to tear it apart. Okay? This can be done in any collaboration system, SharePoint or any of the other competitors. So, back talking about our customer here, why did our customer want this done? What were their objectives when they asked us to come in and help? Well, the first thing is they needed us to ensure that their established processes were kept intact. Their processes are part of their competitive advantage over the other manufacturers. Okay, AdaQuest believes very strongly that technology is here to enable your organization to improve what you do, not to radically change and alter what you do. Software is an enabler. Software is not the end game. Okay, but they also wanted to know, they wanted us to make sure that they were self-reliant. And as Paula said in the beginning, here at AdaQuest, self-reliance is one of our basic mantras. Everything we do for clients, we work super hard to make sure that clients, that customers, that even ourselves can self-maintain. It's the old adage, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach him how to fish, you feed him forever. Okay, there's so much work out there. There's so many ideas to be enabled. We don't need to weigh ourselves down and try to give you solutions that require more and more assistance. Okay, they also required us to leverage SharePoint. Our customer is a very big Microsoft SharePoint using organization. So as collaboration systems go, it's a very good one, and we had no problems with that. But what I'm going to be talking about, what I have been talking about, can be implemented in any collaboration system. They also wanted to automate the subject matter expertise. Okay? What that means is they have subject matter experts that manage battery certifications in North America. They also have people who manage radio certifications in EMEA or other areas. They want those people to maintain the steps to go through the certification. Sounds logical to everyone, to me at least. I hope it sounds logical to you. So that was a requirement of theirs. They did not want to have to pull together all these people to plan a project. Okay? So, with those objectives, what did we come up with? Well, we came up with something that we call the Project Butler. It's an integration of SharePoint and Project Server. SharePoint Server and Project Server. Microsoft has integrated SharePoint and Project. Project Server is on top of, but not really integrated with SharePoint. We really found a way to pull those two together and really get the best breed of information with both systems. Now, I'm going to walk you through a practical example and then demonstrate the tool. Why the walkthrough? Let me first, caveat this and say to you that in doing that, I want to make sure that you understand what it is that you're asking the computer to do. And then I will demonstrate the tool for you. Now, before we go ahead and get into the demo and get deep into this, let me turn it back over to Paula. She has a few questions she'd like to ask you.
Thank you, David. So bear with me a second as I start launching the questions for you. Here we go with the first question, and this is for you. Do you use Project Server? And I'll take a few seconds to allow you to answer that question. Thank you very much for your answers. And we'll move on to the next question, which is this. Within your organization, do you use an EPM system to track your projects? Please take a few seconds to answer that. Thank you. We'll move into the next one. And here we go. How important is your EPM system to your projects? Thank you for your answers. And here's the last one. Bear with me as we launch that one. If you needed to prioritize your projects, would you know which ones to prioritize today? And I'll close that one as well. I'd like to take now the opportunity to have you ask questions, as David will be really happy to answer those at the end. So back to you, David. Here we go.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. There we go. Okay, so we're back to the Project Butler, the integration of SharePoint and Project Server. As we say, marrying business decisions with the creation of project schedules. Okay, so let's go into the practical example. You'll start to understand a little bit more why I want to do it this way. So, the practical example that we've chosen is going on a trip. Now, if you're planning a trip for yourself, I don't think you probably think too much about it. We all think a little bit about it, but do we really take time to write down lists and create schedules? Some of us do, but not everyone. So, it's a small enough task. But think of it this way. If you were scheduling trips for someone else, then, yeah, now we start to think there's more things that we have to do because we don't want to screw up somebody else's. Okay, so, yes, there's more to think about. The length of travel. How long are you going to be away, or is the person going to be away? Is it business or pleasure? That will affect the outcome and what kinds of things you're going to pack. Mode of transportation. Are you going to go by train, where you can take as much luggage as you want, or are you going to go by air, where they're going to charge you an arm or leg for every single bag over that one carry-on? International or domestic, passport or not. You know, there's so many things you have to think about. Once you've thought about those, there's still a whole nother layer below that. This is like peeling an onion. When you're staying in a hotel, is it a king size or a queen size bed? One bed, two beds, smoking, non-smoking? Your rental car, what size of rental car do you want? Do you need a GPS in it? Who's going to take care of your house? Where are you going to get your meals? There's just so many things you have to think about, right? Okay. So I don't want to really belabor that too much and drill down into it, but to automate this, the Project Butler takes, on the left-hand side of the screen, you have questions. You have a SharePoint form that pulls information and stores it in Project Server custom fields. SharePoint custom fields to Project Server custom fields. That's how we integrate and marry the two. But by answering those questions, click the Save button, and we create on the right a Microsoft project schedule for you, fully with work breakdown, indentations, durations, starts, ends, resource names, anything that you can capture in project can be created in the solution with a SharePoint custom field that will allow you to track it in the work package and bring it into project. Okay, so let's go ahead and see this in action. Okay, so here we are, Project Server. If you're not familiar with it, this is the home page for pretty much anybody in Project Server. Project Server is organized, it sits on top of SharePoint, and it is organized in a way of projects, resources, work that I do, that type of stuff. So let's take a look at the Project Center, because this is all about creating projects. So go to Project Center, and then we're going to use one of the features here of Project Server 2010. Here I have a business services project. Okay, so these are projects that are related directly to work performed by business units, for example. Now, why am I hovering over this and pointing on this? Because when I click on it, it now will pull up a set of questions for me. That is my first level of categorization. We talked about using work package libraries like class libraries. If you've done any programming, you might remember that class libraries, there are now hundreds of thousands of functions available to programmers. Okay? It wasn't quite that way back in the late 80s, early 90s. But information overload, you're going to step into that again with creating smaller templates of work packages. Now, you're not going to duplicate information, so there will be overall less information, but there will be more numbers, items that you have to go through because you've broken them into smaller pieces. Okay, so you want to do some classification. Business services versus IT services versus XYZ. Do your categorization at the top level. But then we come into the Project Butler that gives you another level to break this down. Here across the top, I have different roles. The project manager, in this case a software developer, and a project initiator. These are three different roles that I myself have assigned with me. Now, as the PM, I do not have any questions down here under the questions from the Butler. This is a dynamic set of questions for your role. So it's another layer of categorization to break down the questions to get the right information to the right people to build the project. So let me click on Project Initiator, and now you'll see that project questions from the Butler, I do have one. Before I do that, though, I want to give this a demo. So give this a project title. So we'll do a trip to Portland today. Okay, and we can then, pick when we want to take our trip. I think I'm going to go 16th. We'll do my taxes, then I'll go on a vacation. Okay, but that's project information. You can capture static information, as much of it as you want in this screen. It's fully configurable by you, the end user. These questions are also configurable, and we'll show you how to do that in a little bit. But right now, I want to show you how they dynamically pull up for you different sets of values. How long will you be away? I'm going to take a 1 week long trip. Okay. Now, the system goes away and thinks on that, and it says, wait a minute. If you're going to be away for a trip for a week, here's these dependent questions, subordinate questions. Personal or business travel. Yeah, if you're going to be gone for a week, that is a question. How will you be traveling? Again, it's a valid question. If you're gone for a day, some of these may not apply. So let's look at the options. In this case, well, we're going to go and it's going to be a business trip. Yeah, let's make it a business trip. Then let's go ahead and say how we're traveling. Now, I'm going to do some airplane and some driving. Okay. Now, what type of accommodations will I use? See, now here, I don't have a multiple choice. I only have a single choice. It's a radio toggle. So, we'll say it's a public transport. We're going to use public accommodations. And is it international travel? We'll say no, it's not international travel because Portland is within the United States. Let's go ahead and save that. And now what's happening is we've stored these question answers into SharePoint custom fields and into Microsoft Project custom fields. We've then taken those answers and looked through a class library, a work package library of possible work packages that are appropriate for those answers that we gave. We take those task lists from SharePoint, one or many per answer that was given in that question set, and pass that over to Microsoft Project Server. And through its application programming interface, we are able to create projects on the fly for you. Okay, so we're back at Project Center. Let's go ahead and click on the trip to Portland. And Project will now open it for us. And you see, kind of much like the slideware that I had earlier, here is a trip. Here's the planning steps that I would need to go through. There's the business travel, there's the 1 week travel, there's the automobile, there's the air travel. So we have all of that. It pulled all of that together. And you see there's multiple layers of indentation. It follows the WBS outline as identified by the task list. Here's also some durations. Durations were stored in SharePoint and pulled over into Project Server. So that will then determine how long the task is going to be. That's an example to show you that we can do more than just the task list and start dates. We can do any field that's necessary. Okay, now, one question that I've had from a lot of people is, what happens here now that the project is created with those other roles? If they had questions. Okay, well let's go back to the New Butler Project tab. And once that reloads, that shows us now the PM, the project manager, and the software engineer both can go through their questions and add it to the project. Okay, so let's go back to the schedule and just take a look at that one more time. So here is the schedule. It's in Microsoft Project Server. We can open it in Microsoft Project, or we can edit it directly here in the web application. Okay, so that is the overview of how to automate that decision-making process you go through to plan a trip and put it into software. We can do this for all sorts of things. If your project is to set up a new data center, there's a lot of repeatable tasks that happen in that. Pretty much in every project, I bet you that you have more than one repeatable set of work packages that can be pulled out and put into your own class library. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this a little bit more in depth then of how this was made. So I promised you that I was going to give you a look at the questions. How are the questions self-reliant? Well, it's a SharePoint list. This is a very common SharePoint list. Now, if we want to look at being business or personal travel, let's go ahead and edit that item to see what it looks like so we have all the fields available to us in a better layout to understand. And we see there's a title. The title is the language, the question, that will be seen by the user. And then you have to associate a few things. You have to associate a custom field. Where's the answer going to be stored? What type of answer are we going to allow? Text, binary, multiple choice, and then the source table for the possible answers for those lookup values. The order of this question is going to be the first question, second question. These are just relative numbers. You don't have to work very hard to keep them in order. 2 will come before 4, even if there's not a 3. Okay? And then you do your classification, your first layer of classification for which different type of product it is. And that is another list that you maintain. And then the initiator, the role, you assign the role that you think that this question should apply to. Okay, and then we have the custom field that we store it in. Okay, so it's very simple to create a question. Now, when that question gets answered, what happens? Well, it fires off another item that we call a trigger. And this is just a SharePoint list. We decided to call it a trigger. And it's because the answer triggers the next action. This is what determines what that next action is. So let's go ahead and check the multi-day trip trigger. Again, we see there is a form, a SharePoint form for this on top of a SharePoint list. The title is not seen by the user. It's much more for our own management of that list. And we say this is the answer where the trigger where it's a multi-day trip, this action is going to happen. Now, we have here the condition is field. That field really will help us determine whether it's going to be positive or negative logic. So the answer is within this list or not within this list. Okay, the task list WBS, the relative order of the tasks that will be inserted. Then here is the URL of the tasks that will be inserted. Okay, the answers will come from what list? Here it's coming from the time away list. And here it's saying, oh, it's the 1 week answer. Okay? And what question will we tie it to? We tie it to the how long will you be away? Now, we have then subordinate dependent questions which can come up, and you can have one or many. Then you can also add an additional condition if you wish. It's as easy as picking a new question, saying that the answer is positive or negative, and then choosing the answer. Very, very simple. Okay, we're not going to mess up this trigger by doing that, so let's go ahead and cancel it. Now, when you hit that condition, multi-day trip, so answer being 1 week, what happens? We saw the dependent questions show up. Also, if we click on that, this is the task list that got pulled from our library. Whoops, I must have timed out my login. Okay, so we're back logged in here. And this task list that we see, this is the set of tasks, one of the set of tasks, the one for multi-day trip, that showed up in our project. Now, the summary task is going to be the title. So it was 1 week trip, notices, mail, luggage, etc. Then these are the tasks that show up underneath of it. And as you see, we have a 2-level indentation here. We have a 3-level indentation here. SharePoint does not understand hierarchies or indentations. This internal WBS is a SharePoint custom field that we create so that we know what you mean when you enter this information, and we can pass it off to Project Server and say, yes, please make this indentation work this way. Okay, so that's the task list, the question, and the trigger. And then the resulting project is what is made by the system. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our presentation now. There we go. And I'm going to walk through this yet again. Okay, I know I'm belaboring the point, but we're doing this for a purpose, because after the presentation, if you would like a copy of the slides, you can request that from us, or you can go to theprojectbutler.com and download a copy of the slides for yourself. And you don't have the demo in the slides, so I'm sure you'd like to have at least some screenshots of the demo. So let's go through that and show you what it is here. So, self-reliant workflow. We've had people describe it as TurboTax for project managers. Building your project, not knowing the details, just answering the questions. And yes, that's exactly what some of our customers do. Now, here's the questions. It's a SharePoint list item. We want to make sure that you remember that, understand that. Self-reliance, it's right there for you. Triggers, they're just as simple. Again, a SharePoint list item. We want you to remember that. So a question calls a trigger has actions. In this case, it has dependent questions you see there at the bottom of the form, and in the middle of the form it has a task URL that gets launched. Yes, it's the tasks. It's all about the tasks. This is the task list that you would get for this question. Okay? Then the internal WBS is where the indentation comes from that, so that you know that snacks is indented under foods. 3.1 is under 3.0. We call that out for you here on the next slide and show you that the internal WBS code, that is the one big piece of custom code that we have to make this work in Microsoft Project and not just be a flat list that you would get in SharePoint or any other collaboration system or in maybe Excel. Okay? Yes, you can use other tools to accomplish the same thing that we've done here. This is not rocket science. We've put it together and we've tied together some automation pieces to make this easier for you so that it just takes a lot of the drudgery out of making a project plan. Now, pointed out here on this slide to remind you that you can open these task lists in MS Project. You will get the hierarchy in MS Project. You can get the WBS field in MS Project. You save it to SharePoint. It will be a flat list, but the WBS will still be there so that you can create it back into a project when you use the Butler to create projects. So, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I hope you're able to take away some of the tips and tricks that you'll be able to use in your organization to help improve your project management initiation, the project planning phase where that meets execution.